Let's see. First, I wanted to ask you if you studied music in an educational setting, and you know, and based on your experience, how important is it for young aspiring musicians to have an educational setting of music? Yeah. Music.
Yes, I did study music. I studied opera for about 5 years, and played flute. Studied the flute from the time I was 9 until I was about 25, till I couldn't hold my arms up anymore. And
this is what it looks like, Patti. This is there. It goes out.
Oh,
the
great,
student,
okay.
So it's the groove. What actually, when he writes it, if you want, we can send
Yeah,
yes,
the
definitely.
Okay.
great, great. And I think it's very important. I think the more you know, the more you can accomplish. You know, the more variety you have in what you can do. And I think it's very important to be exposed to all kinds of music, to be able to read, to be able to write. Technique is very important.
All kinds of good.
Did you know that you wrote? I remember when I went to school in Washington D.C. I went back to school after traveling on the road. I was in Howard, and I used to, on the way to the gig, there was this guy named Felix Graham. He used to play. One of your first things that you did by yourself. You wrote your tune. Say
You Love It was the first album. Yeah.
Now you actually, your first recording was in '69, right? With Family Tree.
Well, actually, my first recording was in 50.
Wow.
55. The first record I made when I was 5.
the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
What was that?
it was called Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, but it had nothing to do with the Mary Poppins version.
Oh, okay.
It was kind of like a what would today be considered a classical jazz, like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. Hey,
What label was that on?
RCA.
Oh, really?
And it never came out because the Children's Aid Society found out about my age and they were not amused and they would not
wow.
put it out. Yeah. In those days they were very, very strict because they had so much trouble with kids being abused by their parents and taking their money. And
Yeah.
so they were
like
really
Patti Duke and people
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
So actually this was before Patti Duke.
Yeah.
This was like
On the verge.
Shirley Temple, Judy Garland, problems that they
Mhm.
were addressing. So
Yeah.
I laid low for about 6 months and came back and said that I was a year older than I really was. I lied about my age.
So I wanted to ask you, being the goddaughter of Quincy Jones and Dinah Washington, were you constantly surrounded by music, or was it just something that didn't make much of a difference? Or
Well, my father was a musician, and that's how I got to meet Dinah
Okay.
and Quincy. So yeah.
was he an instrumentalist?
Yes,
or-
he was a trombonist, jazz trombonist, and he worked with Lucky Millinder and Fletcher Henderson and Father Hines and Billy Eckstine and Dinah and
Yeah.
Lena Horne, and so yeah, I was totally immersed in music all the time.
What would you say have been the most significant changes you've seen in the music industry, like over the last
talking about
decade?
that.
Or so, you know?
Well, I was just talking about how vocal styles change. I don't know if it's, I guess you could pretty much say it's every decade, and I guess the 50s there was a particular vocal sound that one had to have to be a part of the popular genre. I would say the 60s through the mid-80s really became an era of individual sounds. There weren't a lot of singers that sounded like other singers. Everybody kind of had their own
Right. Their own little
thing,
trademark or-
yeah. And now we're getting again into a real homogenous kind of sound, particularly in the R&B, the hip hop world.
Yeah.
There's just kind of like one vocal quality that seems to sell. It's very Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
It's very Michael Jackson. It's somewhere between Stevie and Michael.
I heard you demonstrating a few.
Yeah,
looks.
it's, lots of runs and a lot of flourishes and that's kind of the style now that's appreciated, particularly by the younger audience.
Yeah. It reminds me that I wanted to mention, I thought it was hilarious on the live '92 album when you did the impersonations of Michael McDonald.
Oh, everybody's
and Jennifer Holliday,
vocal
yeah.
affectations.
Yeah, the vocal affectations was great.
Yeah. So I think we're even more into the vocal affectation aspect of singing now than we've ever been before.
Definitely.
And it's it's interesting to watch. I was looking at a thing the other day, an old short. I'm trying to remember who it was. It wasn't Lena. Somebody like Lena.
One of the actresses.
Yeah,
maybe, that sang.
and I was just looking not only at the vocal style, that was popular then, but just the body language.
Mm.
The singers in that
To quote an
time.
album.
Huh?
To quote an album title.
Ooh, I wasn't doing that, I
Cheesy.
swear.
I know.
I swear. But
That's
there was like a whole kind of stiff body carriage that all the
Yeah.
singers had. They didn't move their bodies that much. It was just kind of
Right, yeah, definitely.
That was like the most they moved, you know.
very centered.
Very
and
cen-
not,
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not gyrating. or
Right.
much
Now
of
the
that.
singers are like, hey.
Total opposite.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, I think one of your initial forays into the industry, I guess, was through jingle work, or that was one of your early things?
Well,
And-
I kind of had a convoluted career because I did, I was a solo artist first. Made records when I was a teenager, and you mentioned Family Tree, which was the first single that I had that really did anything.
Yeah.
It was kind of a local East Coast and European hit because to
Mm.
this day I go to England and they just like
They know it.
Oh
Wow.
man!
Yeah.
I go to the BBC to do an interview. They're playing Family Tree as I walk in the door, which
Wow.
is really mind
That's
blowing.
great.
Very mind blowing. And I mean, they know all of this old stuff that I did.
They're so receptive over there to the
That would
a
be
lot
great.
of the authentic R&B.
Very
music.
appreciative
Yeah.
of it.
Bye-bye.
Absolutely, absolutely. As a matter of fact, they just did a compilation of all the records I made when I was a teenager.
Really?
That came out in Europe about 3 months ago.
So you did them on a number of labels, I take it, or for
Many,
United
many,
Artists?
many
or, yeah.
labels.
Wow.
Many labels. But I'm sorry, I lost my.
About the jingle work.
Oh,
yeah.
so I started out as a solo artist, and I was working the Intercontinental Hotel chain.
Mm.
And I did that for about 5 years, and I worked there. Those were the days of supper clubs. And we used to do, we being myself and Randy Crawford, used to
Cool.
do South America, the Caribbean, and Canada. Those were the chains of the
So you were
Intercontinental.
on the road.
That we were. As a matter of fact, we would pass each other in the airports and say, because we always used the house band. This was the days before you could afford to travel with a band. So you had a house band, and we would, don't do anything too fast. The drummer sucks, you know. This is passing each other at an airport in Miami. And watch out for the keyboard player. He's got no funk, you know. This is what we would do.
Yeah.
So I did that for about 3 to 5 years, and a lot of the work was in South America, and South America was tremendously volatile politically. Still is, really.
Yeah.
And I got to Bogota, Colombia, to do a gig, and there had been an election the day before, and of course the coup ensued the day after.
Ooh.
And they set a curfew, and I couldn't open because they had a curfew. And I was on the 32nd floor of some amazing, because they have lots of skyscrapers in South America. And I'm in this hotel, I'm looking out the window, and I'm watching them round people up on the streets that are out after curfew and shooting them,
Oh God.
lining them up and killing them. And I'm watching in a bull ring that's like right downstairs from my room. And that was kind of when I said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. But I didn't know what the hell else I was going to do.
Yeah.
So I went home. I had another
Okay,
tour
great.
booked for
Okay,
Intercontinental
thanks for
Hotel.
calling. Bye.
Uh-huh.
I got a phone call from a lady named Aretha Stewart, who at that time was like the #1 vocal contractor in New York. She was doing a session with James Brown, and she had a singer fall out. And she called me. She said, "Patti, I know you're a solo artist. I've sung backgrounds on your records. I feel like an idiot, but I got to get somebody to fill in. I'm doing this session tonight with James Brown. Can you come in?" And I said, "Sure. For you, Maretha, anything." So I went and I did the session. It happened to be the session that James Brown did This Is a Man's World on.
Oh, okay.
And it was the first session he'd ever done where they used strings, which was a big thing for him. And so we did the session. I went home, and in about 10 days, I got this lovely check in the mail. I said, this is interesting.
Eye-opener.
So I got on the phone, and I called Maretha. I said, "You got any more of those sessions?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "You know what? I want to do them." She said, "You're kidding. You're a soloist there." I said, "Not anymore." And so I went from being a solo artist to being a background singer. I did the complete reverse.